All right, so let's go into a little bit of analysis on Avalanche today. We'll be breaking down some of the news that they have launched here in recent days, and I think you guys are going to like it. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. All right, as many of you have followed us, we've covered a variety of Avalanche advancements. One of the key things that we talked about was the NFT ticketing, specifically that could happen within the AVAX ecosystem, but it was happening on Polygon. Now, here recently, Sports Illustrated moved their NFT ticketing platform over to Avalanche. One of the things they noted was this right here. They moved it from Polygon over to Avalanche around 10 months after its launch. So found whatever it was, didn't work out, moved to Avalanche. Now this is underway. Then you have the CEO over at Avalanche talking about this very issue. And it basically said Sports Illustrated needed a chain that actually worked. So they abandoned a project that gave them money and came to Avalanche. So harsh words, but very interesting in the fact that we've got devs starting to move. Now, this is another interesting point. This is a clip coming over from Emin, and he talks a little bit more about the technology. Listen in.
Now, from here on after, you can start your own subnet, and that subnet has seamless access to all of the services and features that are accessible on other subnets. For example, if you want to, like something that a lot of people want to do is use a Chainlink oracle. Well, all of those oracles are on the C chain. So now with Teleporter, it's trivial. Normally, you'd have to go to Chainlink, you'd have to take a ticket, get in their queue, pay them for the integration, et cetera, et cetera. This is why it's so hard for a bunch of these other services on other chains to get started. We went through that phase with the C chain on Avalanche. With Teleporter, that's no longer the case. Our vision that was there from the get-go, our vision that you will see get copied by everybody and his brother, they all lack imagination.
All right, so harsh words, we wanted to dive in a little deeper with the Avalanche team. So joining me today is Luigi DeMeo. Welcome him to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Happy to be here.
All right, so Luigi, you head up business development and ecosystems over at Avalanche. Obviously, there's a lot happening within that, including here recently within the NFT ticketing platform. Talk to me a little bit, first of all, what it takes for projects to get started with Avalanche. What are some of the things that they have to go through?
Yeah, thanks. So it really depends on kind of what they're looking to do. But a lot of these projects that we're talking to are interested in launching their own blockchain. That's a thesis we've had for years. For Avalanche, that includes launching their own subnet. There are a number of third-party providers within the ecosystem that can help with that. There's also AvaCloud, which is a product within Avalabs that can help somebody launch their own blockchain within minutes. And what they're looking for, not only with the ease of launch and the customizability of their chain, but they're also looking for a team that can help them throughout the support lifecycle. No different than somebody having their AWS support solutions architect or solution engineer help them along the way when they have issues. This is something that for some reason a lot of blockchain technologies haven't really scaled to at this point. But I feel like Avalabs has done a really nice job with there's a lot of things to consider when launching your own chain. There are monitoring services, there are networking capabilities, there are customizability with your different nodes, and all that kind of stuff needs to be managed upfront. It's its own infrastructure. So I think we've done a good job from that standpoint with the technology.
We are seeing a handful of projects that have started to move chains, across many different chains. What are some of the big reasons that you're finding, especially around the business development side, of projects that are saying, these are the things that we're finding either deficient that we need to fix, or we need this kind of expansion capabilities with what you guys are offering? What are the key things that they're looking for?
Yeah, there are a lot of good teams in this space. I feel like, there are some interesting technologies out there with diverse capabilities with respect to our capabilities, and why we're seeing some, I think, migration to Avalanche subnets is it's a very practical infrastructure that works. And, that's not something you see a lot of in this space. I've been sort of in the crypto / Web3 space for almost a decade now, and a lot of what it is has been sort of promising of future technologies that never come to fruition or never come to fruition in the way that they were originally envisioned. With respect to SI tickets, I know that they were looking for a lot of those capabilities that I just mentioned with respect to a team that can help stand up a network, a team that can help with the monitoring of the network. They don't want to feel left alone when they have that network live, and they want an infrastructure that works. And we've proven, I think, with the number of subnets that are in production, that this technology does work and it does scale and it is fast, and it now is soon to be interconnected.
Well, I think that's going to be the kind of the killer app for sure, in terms of the holy grail of what blockchain projects are looking for, is that interconnected moment that really starts to take place for Avalanche. But at the same time, when you're a blockchain developer, you've got a project that you're starting to roll out, maybe you're building a next generation app. One of the things that we've looked at, here is just the possibility of making Avalanche more accessible. One of the things I looked at, upfront payment right now around $2K in AVAX per validator. If you look at that, is there alternatives for projects that maybe aren't going to be a monster project in the beginning, for them to onboard in a better way or a more budget-friendly way to come into the AVAX ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Now, there's two important considerations here. The first one is one that the 2000 AVAX requirement is for any of the validators that validate the primary network. So let's call it the main chain of Avalanche. Right now, there's a little bit over 1,700 of those validators. So theoretically, if you launched your own chain as a startup, you could borrow or invite those validators to also validate that subnet, right? Okay. That is also that was the original thesis / idea of Avalanche. But in addition to that, we will also have something called Avalanche Community Proposals, ACPs, and there was one recently proposed, ACP 13, which introduces the concept of subnet-only validators. And what this would be is a validator that does not need to also validate the primary network, but still gets the benefit from the cross-subnet communication that Avalanche has with Teleporter and Avalanche Warp Messaging. And we think that that's important for two main reasons. One, for the startups that you mentioned, but also for institutions that are not comfortable validating a public permissionless network like the C-chain, where there could be all kinds of activity that they aren't regulated in some form or fashion to validate.
Talk to me a little bit more about Teleporter and kind of the vision of what you guys are trying to do with it, and maybe how long this will take place for it to get really into full fruition.
Yeah, Teleport has been in the works in terms of development for a long time. It just got released on Luigi, which is our test net, last week. So we've already seen some exploration amongst community developers in terms of deploying different types of Teleporter instances, connecting from the C chain to their own subnet. So I expect to see that go live, barring any issues in the next few weeks on mainnet. And at that point in time, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to launch your own subnet, bring assets directly from the C chain to that subnet without needing any third-party integration, needing to pay for any endpoints, or most importantly, not needing to trust any external third-party validator sets. The parties involved in the bridging transaction with Teleporter are the validators themselves. So no new trust assumptions. And we think that's an important distinction. And I could talk a lot more about different use cases and interesting things. Emin explained the Chainlink oracles. Another one would be like cross-chain swaps. So let's say I have a gaming subnet and my users are earning some type of gaming token there. Well, you could, as a developer with the Teleporter SDK, configure it such that they can swap with the liquidity on the C chain from the subnet directly, and without them knowing that they've actually traversed two different networks, and just having the assets returned to them on the subnet that they're present on. So, let's say I'm on the Shrapnel subnet and I wanted to make a swap for USDC on the C chain. I could do that seamlessly, have the asset returned back to me, all probably within like 5 to 6 seconds round trip.
So this is going to go live on all subnets soon. That's going to be a big part of this. I'm just kind of curious, do you find that this also is luring in more new projects or either new projects or existing projects that are saying, wait, that's what we've been looking for. What's kind of the inflow for business development for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I also head up our developer relations team, and so a lot of what we're seeing on the the tinkering slash experimentation has been where the interest has been from community devs who have been waiting for this since, frankly, Avalanche launched.
Right.
This has been a big feature, so it's definitely a big moment for us. It's definitely telling the story that Avalanche is in fact a network of networks. And other than, I believe, Cosmos, I don't think there are any other networks that are interconnected in this fashion. And so, one important distinction we also made is with Teleporter, we've made that much easier for the developer to program themselves, versus just leaving them alone and expecting users just to move assets between chains. What we expect is that the developer will program the interactions for the user beforehand, and then you'll see much more, I think, fluid interactions that users don't need to know about, but be comfortable with the security. So I think this is definitely going to unlock a lot of those use cases. It's definitely been a blocker in the past in terms of teams looking for certain things. This was one that they were looking for, and we weren't able to have back in the day, but now we do.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big expansion. I think many of the devs that we've talked to starting to ask a lot more questions around this, especially in this particular point. Once we get done with the interview, by the way, I want to chat with you about a project that I think might be a candidate for this. So because they're looking for those kind of solutions, and I want to kind of get to that. But I want to talk about gas fees for a second, because this is one thing that, of course, everybody's facing. You kind of look at the chart here from Ethereum all the way into Avalanche right here in comparison to Polygon, which has been one of the more efficient networks out there in terms of fees. What's being done to help reduce and or control these fees on Avalanche?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think gas fees for the primary network is a different consideration for the gas fees of a subnet. For example, on the Dexalot subnet, I think we're seeing gas fees which are like a 1/100th of a penny. You can configure gas fees along to the subnets in general, but in terms of the main chain, it's also important to consider Avalanche's instant finality, 1,700 nodes, and that's different than something like the Polygon POS, which is 100 nodes, and has all different types of other configurations and things to consider. So they're not apples to apples in a lot of ways, and frankly, you could floor the fees as low as you want, but you're ultimately fighting a game in terms of deterring spam. And so if you lower them too much, you're going to get more spam. If you get more spam, your state will grow pretty fast. And a lot of this is sort of fundamental issues with the way the EVM is designed, and that's why we also have other that's why we also are planning a lot of efforts on other virtual machines and frameworks long term.
What will that look like going forward? I mean, you're talking about planning other EVMs here. I mean, I'm just thinking roadmap down the road, what that would look like in the next few years, because this will eventually scale to, and we'll talk about Pulsar in a second, but you're going to see a lot of transactions coming in onto AVAX. So you've got to be able to deal with that in the future as it grows. What are the plans there?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we're working on and tackling this. One, we have our subnets, if programmed the right way, they can handle a lot of load, a lot of transactions, super low fees, feel comfortable with that, even in the EVM instance. But longer term, we see this industry really scaling to, supporting a lot of the internet's economy. And if it does so, then we'll need still more scale. And that's why we've been building in-house something called the Hyper SDK. It is our own SDK framework written from scratch. You could think of it in some ways of something like the Cosmos SDK, although there are many technical differences and choices. But this will effectively allow for developers to launch their own subnet with the Hyper SDK, customize certain parameters, and achieve something like 100,000 transactions per second. That's what we're aiming for. And so you can think of it like a super fast virtual machine that is approachable for developers. And that's a framework that will probably be, inviting developers and different institutions and enterprises to actually play with in the near future. My hope is later this year.
That's good news. Okay, so I'm looking here at a tweet we put out. This is in reference to the Pulsar subnet. They hit, 200 million transactions on Avalanche, and this is a big number. And if you look at we've shown this many times on our show, is the transaction load on Pulsar as a subnet right now, or I should say as a test net. This is going to continue to explode for them because they haven't really fully developed, as a project yet. What would that look like on the main net? And how would you be able to deal with the fees there if you were Pulsar? Because I'm thinking I'm a project lead, I'm developing this, and I need this kind of transaction flow. It would seem that this could be very costly to maintain on the mainnet.
It would be. Running this type of load on the mainnet would definitely increase fees. I think that's why Pulsar, you're seeing them on their own test subnet and achieving these types of transactions at that load. So I think, what we've learned and what we've been pitching as a vision long term has been, if you have a ton of load, you're going to want transaction isolation and fee isolation. And one pragmatic way to achieve that right now is to launch a subnet, floor a bunch of transactions, and you can actually customize the subnet in terms of who can deploy contracts on the chain, what type of addresses can interact with it. And right there, you're introducing new spam deterrents that aren't only the gas fees themselves. And that already increases the load dramatically. And now with Teleporter, you'll be able to move those assets seamlessly across the network, but have your own fee isolation. And one important point I'd like to make on fee isolation, because it is very important, is your fees for your subnet are isolated and correlated to the activity that your app or chain is producing. That's a little bit different than other frameworks and architectures out there like L2s, where their fees are actually correlated to the network that they settle on in many regards. And so, you might be a game L2 and you might be sort of experiencing fee spikes that have nothing to do with the actual activity that you're contributing.
So these advancements, when you look at just the transactions per second right now, what we're going to see in the future for Avalanche is accelerated scalability here. Right now, we're seeing this, I would say, lightly deployed. Avalanche still has a long way to grow in terms of utility, use case, all sorts of projects that will start to roll out. And then you have into real-world asset tokenization, which I think is something John Wu talks about quite a bit. There's going to be a lot of that movement out there. So scalability, what's the number one thing that Avalanche has to do to prep for scalability?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fighting a battle on multiple fronts. We need to be able to deploy EVM-based subnets in the short term. We need to build the Hyper SDK to be super scalable and to be able to easily migrate from the EVM to that Hyper SDK. And we need all those subnets to be able to talk to each other. If we can do those three things, we should be able to handle the load. There is no limit to the amount of subnets that can be created. So theoretically, we can continue to launch subnets and the Avalanche network will continue to hum along. And then, one thing that's understated, and I don't think many people talk about, is the more interesting subnets that we have, the more interesting the communication protocol is. You can see business partnerships align between different subnets and being able to move their assets between them without needing to hire or integrate some third-party entity as sort of a bridge that they both need to mutually trust, I think is important. It's embedded in the protocol design by itself, and that's what speeds up, I think, the network effects of sort of cross collaboration that we expect to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the Beam subnet. I think there's going to continue to be a lot more growth in the gaming sector. Obviously, Beam being one of the ones and projects that we cover here on the show. I was looking also over at your ecosystem timeline. This is pretty aggressive. I don't know if many people have seen this. The gaming development that you guys did last year, pretty much at really breakneck speeds. Lots of ecosystem development, and then obviously some moves even in the DeFi space with things like JP Morgan coming in, Republic announcing its plan to launch on Republic Note on Avalanche. We've reported on many of these things. And also, you guys have, and I want to talk here recently about VRIX, because I know that was a talking point we want to kind of cover today, but the scaling solution from VRIX. and the Hyper SDK, basically what this does is really just bolster the engine of AVAX as a subnet engine itself. Next step in terms of opportunities, big brand, real world asset tokenization, gaming. You guys seem to have your hooks into a lot of different categories, including even things in the deep end space, obviously within the DeFi space as well, with things like Dexalot, which has been super interesting to watch. But is there one particular category that you feel like Avalanche really accelerates in?
Oh, that's a good question. I think with a lot of people had expected chains to be vertical specific back in the day. And, if you think about it like a cloud provider, it'd be odd to be like AWS is the cloud provider for only gaming or something like that. So I think we service a lot of different use cases. And, we definitely invested heavily and aggressively in gaming early on. I think we're about to see, and we're starting to see the fruits of that labor quite soon. Same with institutional. Those are institutional in particular. It's a very long sales cycle. We recently, I think last week in particular, announced another initiative with Citigroup as they did a new tokenization effort on the Spruce Evergreen subnet, which was exciting in conjunction with Wellington and others. So we've sort of taken these long-term bets, but I think with sort of the area that I expect to see more growth out of that we're not seeing yet is consumer crypto. And what I mean by consumer crypto is retail apps, whether they're social type of apps, whether they're things like Farcaster, Stars Arena, all these types of things. I think we're going to see sort of like this Cambrian explosion of innovation in that space. And I think finally the tech can handle it. Whereas, a lot of people tinkered with those ideas back in 2017, but I don't think that the infrastructure was ready at that point, whereas now it is. So I expect to see a large growth out of there. You could expect us to place a lot of investment there as well.
Interesting.
And be aggressive.
It's good to hear you say that, because I said as an advisor in those kinds of, because I see the retail front, especially in kind of the functionality of certain categories that are really going to grow. So to your point, I think that's you're right. There hasn't been a lot of growth in that area on many chains, much less, what we've seen here. I want to go over to gaming before we wrap up and just get your opinion. Obviously, off the grid, big win for you guys and Gunzilla when you look at just the efforts now on Xbox or getting ready to release here on Xbox. And you look at the advancements that we're seeing now from a Web 2 to Web 3 gaming ecosystem to become a reality. What are your thoughts on where that's going? And, kind of give me your insights on kind of the gaming ecosystem. Do you see a lot more action coming?
Yeah, so I've been sort of waiting with a bated breath of how gaming would develop in a lot of ways. I am so excited for Off the Grid. It is probably one of the apps that I'm most excited and that I think could be most influential for Web3 in general in the near future. I mean, I think it's the first Web3 game to be accepted in Xbox Store. Which is a huge feat, right? So being able to play a game on your PlayStation, Xbox console that has a subnet running in the background that the user doesn't even know about, but that they have ownership of assets, and there's all these new gamification elements that the team at Gunzilla has thought about. I just think this is the shot, not the only shot, but one of the large shots where we can see some true Web3 infiltration into retail users. And then hopefully after that, with something like Teleporter, we can take those users and incentivize them to do other things with other subnets. That's the idea. And hopefully, we'll start to see, people getting used to their having a wallet and the normal things that most are accustomed with in Web3.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because we're excited. We continue to watch the gaming ecosystem and, the success of projects like Pal World. This was one that we've tracked here kind of ironically, thinking that at some point this could also be one that has maybe a natural evolution toward NFT activity, very viral. Do you feel like maybe Off the Grid could get that kind of viral approach with their entry into Xbox?
I think there's a good shot for it. I mean, I want to caveat and say, like, there are many games that are built every year and some do well and some don't. But
Sure.
I think, from what I've seen from the team, from what I've seen from the playables, everything, from the storyline, it lines up to being a fascinating game. And I think that hopefully after what they've done, games will look at Web3 as an asset, not something that they need, like, we have to like do some blockchain stuff. No, they'll be like, oh man, we actually have to do the blockchain stuff because it's introducing new features that people want. And that's where we reach sort of a tipping point.
Well, kudos to you and your team. We've had many devs on our show. They always compliment the Avalanche team for being reachable, being able to actually talk to somebody
Thank you.
when you got an issue. So continue to keep that up out there. But anyway, it's been good having you on the show today. Luigi, thanks so much for stopping in today.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. So you guys are maybe listening in on the podcast side of things. Jump over here to the YouTube channel because this is where you're going to get a little bit more of a deeper dive. And it's also where you can subscribe to the channel, get a lot more information on some of the projects and the interviews that we do here. So all you have to do, just find us there on YouTube, Paul Barron Network. Follow me on X. It's just @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.